Hi there, welcome back to the channel. I'm Julian, the Uruguayan polyglot. I upload new content every week, so if you're into language learning, you might consider subscribing. In some of my previous videos, I've talked about how I learned vocabulary. Creating that content made me reflect upon my learning methods, and I eventually reached the conclusion that I could be learning new words way more efficiently. So I decided to change my learning strategy a little bit. In today's video, I'm going to explain how I went about this change, namely, of how I went from using lists of vocabulary to using Anki flashcards. Let's structure the video as follows. Firstly, I'll explain what Anki is and why I decided to transition. Then I'll outline how I'm going about it and what types of flashcards I'm creating. And I wrap up by indicating my next steps in this exploration journey. So if you're interested in exploring Anki for language learning, then stay tuned. For the last few months, I've been thinking of trying out a different method for learning new words. Deep down, I knew that no matter how hard I tried to work on my lists of vocabulary, I would never be as efficient as an algorithm. Even though I was trying to follow a spaced repetition sequence, I would still make the mistake of either repeating the word too often at the beginning or of not going over it often enough in the long run. Luckily, this sort of very efficient algorithm has already been created, and it is what makes Anki so great. I discovered this app close to a year ago in one of Ali Abdal's videos. It is a very famous tool that has been used by students around the world to memorize concepts quicker through the use of flashcards. A flashcard, for those of you who don't know it, is a small note card. There are many types of flashcards that can be created. For instance, you could have just an image or a sentence with a gap that has to be filled out. In language learning, a basic one would be the word in your target language at the front and the translation at the back. Although you can make this a little bit more diverse, as I will explain later. By making the effort of trying to come up with the answer, you're doing active recall, which strengthens the neural connections of that particular concept you're trying to learn. And if you go through the flashcards repeatedly over time and space those iterations, then you're using spaced repetition to learn that concept. It is this combination of spaced repetition and active recall what makes Anki so powerful. The main advantage of Anki vis-a-vis handmade flashcards is that it has a very refined algorithm. Every time you go through a flashcard, you need to indicate how difficult you deemed it to be. This input you provide is factored in by the algorithm to calculate the moment when you're going to forget the content of that flashcard. It is going to be just before that forgetting moment when you're going to be shown that card again. This explanation was very succinct. If you want to know more about how Anki or its algorithm work, then I suggest you check out some other video. So now let me briefly tell you how I went about this transition, including how much time each of the steps of the process has taken me. First of all, I had to install Anki, both on my computer and on my iPhone. By the way, the iOS version costs 20 euros. I think it's going to be worth the money though. This step took me around 15 minutes. Then I synced the apps. This way I can have the information available on both devices. I'm always using the computer to create the flashcards, but I do use the phone often to go through them. So syncing was a step I could not miss. This took me a little bit more than 15 minutes. Then I registered on Skillshare, something I wanted to do for a long time, and took Ali Abdal's course on how to use Anki. The course is more than 5 hours long, but I did not go through the most advanced stuff. Since I went through it at double speed, it took me just around 2 hours to get the information I needed. It was useful to understand how the app works and how to use it properly. Then I watched a few videos and read a few articles about how to use Anki specifically for language learning, which took me around 2 hours again. After doing all this, I was ready to start with the most difficult part of the transition, namely of moving all the content I had gathered in my vocabulary lists to Anki. And as you can imagine, I had a lot of words to transfer. I decided to do this with Russian, the language I'm currently studying, as well as with some low-frequency words I want to learn in both French and Italian. So how long has this taken me? Well, it's still ongoing, but so far I've put in around 8 hours. This might surprise some of you. You might be wondering why it's taking me so long. Well, there are a few reasons for this. Firstly, because I cannot work on this for more than 30 to 45 minutes at a time. The reason being that after that period of time, I reach a point where I feel saturated. There is a limit to the amount of information you can absorb. If I've spent 45 minutes creating flashcards in Russian, my brain is about to explode. After that, it is useless to continue doing that. I have to stop. Secondly, not only do I have to introduce the words in Anki, I also need some time to review the flashcards. In this video, I talked about the vocabulary black hole, a situation I often found myself in in which I had forgotten most of the words I was trying to learn. I want to avoid finding myself in this very same situation with the flashcards. That is, I want to make sure that I am assimilating the newly introduced words. And for that, I need to set aside some time every day to review the cards. Otherwise, I'll be overwhelmed with the amount of flashcards I've created. So, to sum up this point, because I cannot work on creating new flashcards for more than 45 minutes and because I need some time to review the flashcards I've created, the transition is taking me a while. So, let's now go over the language learning flashcards I'm creating. The most basic one would be writing the word you want to learn in your target language on the front and the English translation on the back. But as I've said several times, just doing this would not be a good strategy to learning vocabulary because I'm missing the context. Thus, I usually create a second flashcard of that same word where it shows up in a sentence. I look up examples of that word, then I add one phrase in the original language and the English translation on the back. A third type of flashcard I'm using involves images, especially when dealing with nouns and verbs. In this case, I place the image on the front of the flashcard and on the back I'll write the word in the target language. And finally, I've used the closed type of flashcards in some situations. This is the type of card where you sort of have to fill the gap. I find this pretty useful when I want to learn expressions or combinations of 2 or 3 words. In those cases, I might select the element of the sentence I'm struggling the most with and just hide it. Let's now check the next steps. The first thing I have to do is to complete the transition. I hope this does not take me more than a couple of weeks. After that, I'll keep using Anki for a while. I want to find out whether it actually works better than the system I've been using so far. And I also want to experiment with different types of flashcards and different types of Anki settings in order to see how I can optimize this process of learning new words. All in all, you can expect a few more videos about Anki from my side. I'll do an update video in a few weeks or months to tell you how it's going and maybe to give you some useful tips. So that was it for today. I hope this video helped you decide whether you should use Anki or not and how to go about it. More videos coming up next week, so see you soon.